Hey everyone, the Peacemaker series has finally premiered and now officially in James Gunn's DCU. The first episode of the second season made several retcons to place Chris Smith in the DCU, leaving no doubt about it. But even amid so many retcons, James Gunn managed to focus on what matters most, telling a good story. In today's video, we'll completely analyze this first episode of Peacemaker's second season. What a great season opener. I liked it a lot. You can see that James Gunn's writing quality from the first season is still present in the new one. So in this video, we'll analyze the character arcs, the themes of this second season, the DC Universe references, and what might happen in the future of the DCU. Over the next 8 weeks, we'll analyze every episode of Peacemaker Season 2, and I hope to have you here with us in our videos. But before we start, don't forget to click the like button, comment below, and subscribe for more content like this. Also, follow our other social media, Instagram and Threads, where I'll keep you updated about this universe we love so much. All right, now let's begin the analysis. Well, James Gunn used the recap from the previous season to make the retcons, altering small event details to fit this story into the new DCU. What stood out most was the replacement of the Justice League with the Justice Gang, along with Superman and Supergirl. I find it funny that for many months we speculated on how James Gunn would fit Peacemaker into the DCU, and in the end, it was the simplest way possible. It's literally altering the scene from the first season. The scene also confirms that Supergirl is a well-known superhero among other DC heroes. I think this will be important in the future, especially if this new project from James Gunn is the Superman and Supergirl crossover, because this way you don't even need to introduce Supergirl to the Justice Gang characters. Now, this isn't the only retcon, because the joke at the start of the series undoes that joke with Aquaman, which also confirms that Aquaman in the DCU isn't a well-known person yet, just like Green Arrow, who is mentioned in the first season, but confirmed by James Gunn to not be canon. And I have to say, I've seen many retcons in my life, but a retcon in a season recap that I've never seen. The episode starts with Eagley bothering Chris while he sleeps in a scene. And it's impressive how James Gunn doesn't miss on animal CGI, right? Eagley wants to go for a walk, but since it's snowing, Peacemaker has the idea of taking him for a walk in the quantum zone. Inside, we're introduced to a new alien character. I found it funny how they expand on a concept from the quantum zone that we saw in the first season, as if it were a kind of neighborhood there. The alien opens the door, puts the creature in the incinerator, ignores the Peacemaker neighbor, and leaves. Now, we don't know who this alien is or if he's a known character from DC. I believe he's just a new character James Gunn created, just like he did with Mr. Handsome and the Hammer of Baravia. James Gunn mentioned that Mr. Handsome and Superman caught kids' attention the most. I imagine he created this other alien for the Peacemaker series, inspired by the unexpected success of Mr. Handsome. While searching for Eagley, Smith finds another stand with Peacemaker gear. This piques his curiosity, and he tries his password on the door, which actually works. The door leads to a mansion, and in this land, Peacemaker is a hero, and his father and brother are alive. They even have the key to Evergreen. This city is known in the DC universe as it used to be home to Green Lantern. It's kind of funny because now this city is more known as Peacemaker's Town. Funny how things changed when Peacemaker meets his dad. He freaks out and leaves, leading us to the new opening. Remember, at the end of Season 1, Chris started having visions of his dad. I always thought that ending was really cool because it's something that happens in the comics, you know, with Peacemaker. I hope that isn't forgotten this season. I really wish James Gunn would invest in that. But it's funny in the first season that he has a vision of his dad. And now in this second season, he finds his dad alive in another land, which seems like this season will be another James Gunn story about daddy issues, right? A story with a lot of parental problems. Now, talking about the opening, the highlight is really Chris's romantic dance with Harcourt. It's clear that this season, they're focusing more on this couple. Plus, we get a better look at Blue Beetle's outfits and Peacemaker's brother, Keith. This opening turned out great. I really like this song. Enjoyed the choreography. It's like a bigger, more equipped version of the first season. But of course, right, comparisons with the first season are tough because the first opening was unexpected. When they started dancing that way for the first time, nobody saw that coming. It was shocking. That feeling is nearly impossible to reproduce in another opening. Still, it's a very cool opening with a great song and choreography, but You know, the first one is the first. 6 months later, Adebayo seeks out Peacemaker at his home for an interview. This is the moment James Gunn uses to introduce the arcs and goals of both characters. Since Adebayo exposed her mom, she hasn't been able to find a job. She was even kicked out of her wife's house. Meanwhile, Peacemaker wants to be seen as a hero by everyone, so he's applying for a spot in the Justice League. This dialogue has a nice James Gunn vibe. The conversations feel natural and consequently funny because of the characters. What I mean is that the dynamic between these two characters is really good and maintained from the first season. Their conversation leads to Harcourt, and of course, Peacemaker wants to know if she mentioned him, which seems like it'll be a significant narrative point this season. The Justice League interview takes place in an abandoned Crank Toys store. This references the character Cosmo Crank, a Batman villain known as Toymaker, not to be confused with Toyman, who is a Superman villain. They're similar, but not the same character. When Chris enters, there's another reference to White Rabbit, a Batman villain. It seems she was actually trying to be a hero. The setup for this joke is great because right before in the car, Peacemaker complains that Justice League heroes bully him. Then he walks in and sees her crying, leaving the job interview, and he can only imagine what they said about her. It's a great joke, and for Peacemaker's worries, the interview is conducted by Maxwell Lord, Guy Gardner, and Hawkgirl. And the first detail I wanted to highlight here is that the Justice Gang is funded by Maxwell Lord. James Gunn recently mentioned that in the DCU, there will be 3 competitors vying for power: Metahumans, the government, and businessmen. Maxwell Lord fits into this third category. Now, we need to know his intentions in funding a team of heroes. Personally, I believe it's to gain more power, not that I see this Maxwell Lord as a villain. After all, James Gunn once commented that he didn't see Maxwell Lord as a villain, so I imagine he prefers the 80s Maxwell Lord. He had good intentions, but also his own interests. That's what I think the James Gunn DCU will do with Maxwell Lord. Now, speaking of the interview itself, I laughed quite a bit, at least 2 times. I even think there's the best joke of the episode. It's nice to see a bit more of Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, and Hawkgirl interacting. They poke each other in a way that shows they are good friends. Now, Guy's reaction when he discovers the microphone was on caught me off guard. This first episode really has great jokes, and I dare say they're even better than the jokes in the Superman movie. Of course, the Superman film isn't a comedy, nor is its main goal to be funny. But I feel that when James Gunn is writing an R-rated series like Peacemaker with Guy Gardner, he feels much freer to write. You know, less pressure, because he's in his comfort zone and he does very well in that zone. John Cena's performance makes the scene even funnier because he seems genuinely hurt by Guy Gardner's words. It's all very funny. An important dialogue is when Maxwell Lord says that metahumans are attracting distrust, and that they try not to kill anyone. This isn't the first time the Gunn DCU talks about metahumans having distrust from the general population. And this whole topic could be a discussion on its own because I think this is a crucial hint for the future of the DCU. This anti-metahuman sentiment, the population's dislike for metahumans, is something I believe James Gunn will develop in the DCU's future. This scene is also very important to show Peacemaker's character evolution because he really has this issue of having killed people in the past, but now he claims to be a different person, trying to be a good person. And the response I felt from Peacemaker was very honest. I truly believed his words. I buy this Peacemaker who thinks he's a superhero. Even if he's not, Chris believes in this moment. And I'm curious to see what the series will do with this understanding of his. Chris leaves the interview frustrated, and meanwhile, Harcourt is evaluated by a psychiatrist from a U.S. agency. She is diagnosed with male toxicity, which makes her super irritated. Just like Adebayo, Harcourt believes she's suffering consequences from Amanda Waller's Exposed. And this will be a bit of Harcourt's arc, which is about finding peace with herself now that she's no longer a government agent. There's a part of Harcourt that longs for violence, for the adrenaline of being an agent. She herself says that she only knows how to do this. She needs this job that has kind of become her addiction, but now that she's no longer an agent, she feels frustrated just like Chris, and she doesn't know how to deal with it. By the way, this seems to be a bit of the season's theme. As we'll see, all the main characters are somehow frustrated in their lives. You know, maybe they think they've reached the peak of their lives by saving the world, and now that they need to return to this daily routine, none of them can handle it properly. It's as if life is much more boring at this moment. Now that the group is separated, there's no big adventure anymore. Each one is frustrated and reacting in their own way. Harcourt is angry. Adebayo tries to see the positive side of things. Chris, as we'll see, will fall into drugs. Vigilante misses his friends and forces contact with them, and Economist, well, he's bored. So let's see how James Gunn will develop this theme. Chris will talk to Harcourt in her apartment. Just like Adebayo's dynamic, the two flow naturally in dialogues here, talking about the most random things until it converges on the fact that they spend a night together. Peacemaker really wants Harcourt to like him, but the more he pushes, the more she pulls away. They argue at Oros, which makes Chris even more frustrated. He goes home and gets high. And this is where a wild party happens. And of course, this part can't be shown on YouTube, right? So maybe I'm overvaluing it, but I find this scene very important. Truly, not from a narrative standpoint, but because of the DCU itself. What this symbolizes about the tone of the DCU. When James Gunn said each series and movie would have its own tone, he wasn't joking. I mean, do you think Marvel or Disney would do anything like this scene? Never. Impossible. And this shows how much James Gunn has total freedom to do whatever he wants in the DCU. Yes, I know there were scenes of nudity in the first season too, but back then it was the DCEU in Warner's mess and in Hamada's chaos, but now it's a new universe, and we just came out of a Superman movie, which, let's face it, is a more family-friendly approach, especially for kids. And then we jump to this Peacemaker series, and it's rated R. So this shows that each DCU project will have its own tone. This also clearly shows that anything can happen in the DCU. Like, I don't know, when there's a Lobo series, they can do crazy things like this with Lobo too, because Lobo comics have lots of nudity. Tired of this world, Peacemaker has the idea to visit another world through the quantum portal, but it turns out he was being monitored by Economist, who is working for Argus, and when activating the portal, the agency is alerted. This brings us to a scene with the new character Sasha Bordeaux and Rick Flag Sr. And Sasha Bordeaux, yes, is an unknown character, but that doesn't mean she isn't important to DC. She was Bruce Wayne's bodyguard and is a key pillar of one of Batman's best arcs, which is Batman Hush and Fugitive. However, Sasha becomes even more important later when she becomes a member of Checkmate. In this version of the DCU, Sasha works for Argus, and she seems to be a very focused person on her job. I don't doubt that James Gunn is laying the groundwork to introduce Checkmate because this is an organization that fits perfectly with the DCU right now. This idea of carrying out secret missions anywhere, Checkmate can definitely fit into this story. Economist is going to check what's happening, and through the window, he sees the party, but more importantly, he sees the quantum portal, takes a picture of it, but doesn't alert Argus. And this is cool to show that a guy like Economist, who is always worried about work, deep down cares much more about his friends because he's protecting Chris here. However, let's be honest, it's only a matter of time before Argus discovers what Cruz is doing at his house. Then we cut to Rick Flag Sr., because this might be the most important scene in the DCU so far. Rick Flag is watching the same program we saw in Superman The Sphere. It stated that there are many escapes happening in both Belle Reve and Arkham. First, Arkham Asylum is confirmed in the DCU, but the most important point I want to bring here is this narrative the program is making about anti-meta-human sentiment. Perhaps within the DCU universe, this isn't the only program doing this. Many other programs might be doing the same thing. From there, a narrative of an anti-meta-human feeling is created. The fact is, there's a rising intolerance towards metahumans, and that's what I meant when I said the future of this first chapter, Gods and Monsters, is here. It's in this story that James Gunn will work. I'm sure of it. Of course, this isn't the focus of Peacemaker, but James Gunn has already mentioned that the movies and series, even indirectly, will end up contributing to this narrative of the first chapter. We return to Peacemaker, who is drunk and frustrated. He decides to go to the other world, and here we see in this newspaper a reference to the Ultra-Humanite, a well-known villain from the Justice League. Chris is lucky because the Chris from this world is currently in Bloodhaven. And, you know, if there's Bloodhaven, it means there's Nightwing. The first person he meets is his brother, Keith. Peacemaker doesn't know how to deal with so much information, especially with his brother alive. And again, I found John Cena's performance very good. Soon after, Peacemaker's father appears, and the three gather for a celebration. The whole point of this scene is to show that in this world, Peacemaker supposedly has the life of his dreams. They are heroes, and his family loves him very much. There's even this small moment where his father says he loves him, and Chris is shocked because that was probably the last thing he expected to hear from his dad. Great scene, and this whole sequence is excellent. Until now, if this first episode was delivering good scenes and good jokes, here we have a scene that I consider great on a level comparable to the first season. This is the classic multiverse story, and it forces him to see things differently. It's like looking in a mirror and seeing everything you've always wanted, and how that affects him. We know from the trailers that Peacemaker will live in this world or will try to live there. Now, my biggest doubt is whether Keith and Augie in this world are really as nice as they appear to be, because I doubt it. Deep down, one of them is going to be evil, for sure, or maybe both of them. Meanwhile, Harcourt goes to a bar and gets into a fight. That's her way of dealing with her frustration. She went to the bar intending to fight. That's how she feels alive, and this little fight scene is pretty cool. Well edited and choreographed. Back to Chris. He discovers that his ex in this universe is actually Harcourt. In other words, in this universe, he has everything he's always wanted. But unfortunately for him, the Peacemaker from this world shows up. A fight between the two happens, and they end up in the quantum zone. Our Chris gets beaten badly, but manages by a stroke of luck to kill the Peacemaker from the other world. And it's at this moment that the episode ends. So I really liked this first episode. I even liked how James Gunn does the retcon. In the end, it's much simpler to explain it this way. But talking about the episode itself, it was an episode that I consider very good. It presented the arcs of all the characters well. I like how the characters are more depressed, frustrated. The jokes are really good, and especially James Gunn's comedic timing. For me, he flowed very well with the dialogues here. The dialogues James Gunn writes for these characters feel very natural. If anyone was worried that the second season might not be good, I think this first episode gives a great first impression. For the second episode, I think we will really see Peacemaker wanting to live in this other world and maybe even telling some of his friends about it. Now, the most questionable point here in this first episode is the antagonist side. I mean, Rick Flag Sr. is a good antagonist for Peacemaker, especially because of the past involving his son. But when I think back to the first season with the butterfly mystery, I see a drop, especially because of the level of threat. But, it's the first episode. There's still a lot to happen. I don't think Rick Flag Sr. will be the main villain of the season. I'm starting to think it might end up being Keith or Augie in this other world. The script logic points more toward those two, but so far I think that's the only more questionable point in the story. When we're talking about the protagonists, I think they were well introduced and their arcs were well presented. I'm very optimistic about what James Gunn can do this season. And well, having said all that, it's time to give a rating. I'm giving this first episode an 8. We always said we needed a second season of Peacemaker and all that, but to make a second season after the success of the first and to at least deliver this first episode, which is an 8, let's see the path this series will take. But if at the end of the day it's an 8 series after a first season that was a 10, I think it's still worth it, especially in a year where, when you look at superhero television series, none have been more than a 7. So having an 8 is already a lot. But anyway, that's just my opinion, folks. Please comment below on what you thought of this first episode of Peacemaker. And don't forget to click the button and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.